Over 10 years ago, I was recruited to participate in the program. It was only supposed to be for one day, but what happened was it ended up being every other Wednesday for over 10 years. And these are men from 18 to 80 who, in lieu of doing up to 1 or 2 years in jail, they get referred to this jail diversion program. 99% are African American, and this is mandated. They don't have a choice. So that if they miss, they end up having to go back into the system. So what happened was, there's a fellow named Bishop Moultrie who's in town who founded this program, and he saw me speak once, and he says, "You seem like you could really relate to some guys who are down and out." And I don't know why he thought I could do it. And so what happened was, I went there for the one meeting, and that's been a whole series of meetings since I've started. And one of the stories I really like telling is, these are rough guys. These are not, gangbangers. They're some tough guys. And one May, about 5 years ago, I took my oldest son with me, and we did a father-son kind of dialogue, so they could see how a father and son can interact and not always agree. Because what happens is that many of them do not have father figures in their lives, and it can be violent very quickly. So we had a nice discussion, and my next session, I told my wife I'm gonna take the summer off because I'm really getting tired. And so my next session, I showed up, and the bishop said that 3 of the guys wanted to speak to me. Well, generally when they want to speak to me in a small group, it's about HIV, their medications, So we go into the small room, and I said, "So what's up, guys? What is it? Is it a medical issue?" They said, "Well, no." I said, "Well, what's going on?" And here you got these grown men who are really tough guys. They were hanging their head like, I said, "Come on, guys, we gotta get our class started." They said, "Doc, if we had a dad like you, we probably would not be here today." I said, "You know something? I think that's one of the nicest things anybody ever said to me." And then they said, "Come on, Doc, let's get the class started." So it's that kind of activity that makes me come back time and time again to work with these men. Because if they had certain role models in their lives, they probably would not have ended up in the system. And so I go back. I talk about everything from anger management, which I'm not. I'm an internist. I'm not trained in any of this stuff. But how do you deal with situations that may cause you to act out in a violent manner? Such as the term disrespect has been shortened to diss. Yes. And if you diss somebody, that can end up really, causing a major bodily injury. And so we talk about those issues. And we talk about everybody in that group. There's over 40 men in the group. Everybody in that group, I ask them a question. How many of you have ever had anybody who's been murdered? And every hand goes up. A close relative or friend, every hand goes up. So you're dealing with folks that almost, that kind of thing is kind of what happens. I says, I don't know anybody who's been murdered. But one guy at the end of my class said that his mom was murdered when he was 5 and his dad was murdered when he was 12. So folks says, well, why don't, I said, you don't understand. I says, if you're raised in that environment, whereas violence becomes part of the way you live, then it's not unusual for folks to accept violence as a way of reacting to tough situations. And one other funny story, these guys walked me to my car because they don't want me to get hurt. I said, "Look, guys, I know most of you guys now, so if they, in East Cleveland, if you know me." So I was standing there talking to, and there's a young guy walking down, smoking a blunt. A blunt is, okay, all right. So I said, "Young man, what are you doing?" And the young kid looks at me and says, "F you, old man." The guys at that point were going to hurt him because you don't diss the doctor. So they started out after him. And I said, "Wait a minute, guys, no, we don't do that." And he says, "We're not going to allow him to diss you, doc." And I says, "No." I said, "Let's talk about this." So I said, "Okay, let's talk, but we're going to go fix him." And I said, "You know what really bothered me?" They said, "What was that?" I said, "Why did you say F you and leave the old man out of it?" They started laughing. They said, "That is too funny." So now we're laughing. I said, "So next time somebody said, just say, hey, just use the curse word, but leave the old man." We started laughing. The whole thing dissipated. the whole thing was over. So that's why it's such a special program for me. I said I've taken my son a couple of times. I've taken medical students with me so that they can see what it's like. And also I took them on a field trip. I asked the guys in the class, I says, how many of you ever been to Case Western Reserve? They said, you can't go there. I said, what do you mean? They said, you're not allowed to go on their property. I said, what do you mean? It's right on Euclid Avenue in Delbert. They said, oh no, we know you can't go there. I says, I'm gonna take you on a field trip. You're going to Case Western with me. He says, and I said, I'm gonna take you to the medical school. They says, you would take us into a medical school? I says, absolutely. So here I come with about 20 guys. We go into the medical school. Now again, tough guys, right? They were like, I swear, a bunch of young kids on a field trip. They were looking, I took them around, showed them the labs, I showed them the lecture hall. We sat in the lecture hall, and they were like, we're in medical school. I can't wait to tell, we went to medical school. Now you can think that's kind of silly or whatever, but one, they were on the campus, and two, they were in a place that they would have never imagined that they could have been sitting in a class where medical students sit to learn how to be doctors. So in our next session, we talked about that, and they said, we told all the guys, guess where we were? Doc took us to the medical school. We sat in a class where the medical students sat. It was almost like they'd gotten a little bit of the medical school. Now you can think that's very minor, but this is huge. And East Cleveland is just right, it's in walking distance of the medical school. But it's like that whole university is off limits. So it's these kind of things that I get involved in.